The bright, cold lights flickered above Rhea as she stood in the small, stone-like chamber. The cold air of the alien ship chilled her bones, and the thick chains around her wrists bit into her skin. The once proud and powerful queen of her people now stood trapped in an enemy's prison. The silence around her was suffocating, broken only by the occasional echo of footsteps in the distance. Her mind raced, full of thoughts of escape, but she knew the reality. There was no way out. Rhea had always known this day could come. The Terran Federation, a military power feared across the galaxy, had been growing stronger for years. They had attacked her world, leaving nothing but destruction in their wake. She had fought back, bravely leading her people, but in the end, they had been outmatched. She was the last of her royal bloodline, the last hope of her people, and now she was a prisoner. She could still hear the voices of the Terran soldiers, their harsh words filled with triumph. They had won, and now they would make sure she paid for resisting. The fear of death filled her heart, but there was something else too, a feeling of uncertainty. What would they do to her? Would they execute her? Would they use her as a tool in their war games? She shuddered at the thought. Rhea wasn't afraid to die. She had always known that one day her life might be sacrificed for the greater good of her people. But what she feared more than death was the loss of dignity, the loss of everything that made her who she was. She was a queen, and queens did not bow to their enemies. She would not be broken. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps grew louder and the door to her chamber opened. Rhea straightened, lifting her chin high and meeting the figure that stepped into the room with a calm yet fierce stare. The man who entered was unlike the others she had seen before. His uniform was marked with the insignia of the Terran Federation, but he did not look like the others. His dark eyes scanned her with a mixture of curiosity and something else, something unreadable. "You're the queen of the Tessas, aren't you?" His voice was firm, yet there was a softness to it that surprised her. "Rhea, the last of the royal bloodline." She did not respond. Instead, she looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. He stood tall with a strong build, and his face was set in a stern expression. His features were sharp, but there was a gentleness in his eyes that seemed out of place for someone who had been sent to capture her. "Your people fought bravely," he continued, taking a step closer. "But your world, it was lost. And now it's just you left." Rhea clenched her fists, trying to hide the anger that burned inside her. She would not let him see her weakness. "Do you enjoy this? Standing in the ruins of my world, taking what you want?" The man's face tightened, but he did not look away. "I didn't come here to enjoy this. I came because it's my duty." He paused for a moment, looking at her with something that almost seemed like regret. "I'm not the one who decided this war. I'm just following orders." Rhea studied him, trying to read him. His voice was calm, but his eyes spoke of something more, something human. She had seen soldiers before, but none like him. Most had been cold and ruthless, their eyes full of hatred. But his eyes, they were different. "I'm sorry for your loss," he added softly. "But you're not going to be executed. At least not yet." Rhea narrowed her eyes, unsure of what he meant. She had heard rumors of human soldiers who fought with honor, but she had never believed them. This soldier, though, there was something about him that made her question everything she had known about the Terrans. The man stepped forward, the chains around her wrists rattling as he reached out to gently touch her arm. Rhea jerked back, but his hand did not follow. Instead, he spoke again, his voice lower now. "I'm Captain Elias Drake. I've been ordered to guard you. I know you're scared, and I can see it in your eyes. But I'm not your enemy. I don't want to see you suffer." Rhea looked at him, the words catching in her throat. This human soldier, this captain, was speaking to her like she was someone worth caring about. She had never been treated with kindness before by an enemy. And yet here he was, offering something she didn't understand. "I'm a queen," she said, her voice low and steady. "I don't need your sympathy." Elias nodded, taking a step back. "I know, you're strong, and that's why I'm not going to break you. I'm not going to treat you like the others would. You're not just a prisoner to me. You're something more." The words hung in the air between them, heavy and unfamiliar. Ria's heart raced, her mind spinning with confusion. She had always been taught that humans were nothing more than barbarians, ruthless conquerors who took what they wanted and left destruction behind. But Elias, he was different. She couldn't understand why, but she found herself feeling something she hadn't expected: curiosity. Elias turned to leave, but stopped at the door. He glanced back at her, his eyes lingering on her for a moment. "I'll be back later," he said, his voice softer than before. "And if you need anything, let me know." With that, he was gone, leaving Ria alone once again in the cold, silent chamber. But now, for the first time since her capture, she didn't feel completely alone. Something had changed in her, something she couldn't explain. She couldn't decide if it was a spark of hope or the beginning of something more dangerous. The days passed slowly in the dark, cold chamber. Ria, once proud and commanding, now spent most of her time sitting on the hard floor, her thoughts swirling like a storm. The captain's words from the day before echoed in her mind, the kindness in his voice unsettling her more than she cared to admit. She had always believed that her people, the Tessa, were the last hope against the Terran threat. They had fought bravely for their world, but now she was alone, a prisoner of an enemy that she had once sworn to destroy. As much as she tried to push the thought from her mind, Ria could not shake the strange connection she felt toward Elias Drake. The human soldier had not treated her like a prisoner. Instead, he had spoken to her like she was more than just a queen, more than a prisoner. And though she could never admit it aloud, there was something about him that made her question everything she thought she knew. Ria tried to focus on her escape plans, but she knew deep down that it was hopeless. The ship was vast, filled with guards, and her strength was not enough to break the chains that bound her. Even if she somehow managed to escape, where would she go? Her people were scattered, their forces defeated. She would be a fugitive, hunted, down by the very soldiers she had once commanded. The door opened again, and Ria looked up sharply, her heart leaping in her chest. She knew it was him before she saw his face. Captain Elias Drake. He stepped into the room without hesitation, his footsteps heavy yet purposeful. His dark eyes locked onto hers, and for a moment neither of them spoke. Ria stood slowly, her movements cautious. The tension between them was palpable, an unspoken understanding lingering in the air. "I brought you some food," Elias said, his voice steady but soft. He held a small tray in his hands, offering it to her with a slight bow of his head. Ria eyed the food, her stomach growling despite her desire to resist. She hadn't eaten much since her capture, and the scent of the meal was enough to stir her hunger. But she did not take it immediately. Instead, she looked at him, trying to understand what he was offering. "You don't have to do this," she said quietly. "I am your enemy. You should hate me." Elias set the tray down on the small table in the corner of the room and turned to face her fully. "I don't hate you," he said simply. "I never did. War is not about hatred. It's about survival. And right now you're the only one I see who's still fighting for something. I respect that." Ria was taken aback by his honesty. She had expected him to be like the others, cold, calculating, perhaps even cruel. Instead, he seemed genuine. His words were not empty. There was no mocking, no sneer, just a simple, quiet respect. "I don't need your respect," she replied, though her voice faltered slightly. She had always been a leader, a queen who commanded loyalty and fear. To have someone speak to her with such kindness was unsettling. It made her feel vulnerable, something she had never allowed herself to feel. "I know you don't," Elias answered, his tone soft but firm. "But I don't think you need my respect to survive. You've done that on your own. I just want to make sure you're all right." Rhea's eyes narrowed as she studied him. She had always believed that humans were selfish creatures, driven by their own desires, willing to sacrifice anyone and anything for their own gain. Yet here was Elias, acting in a way that defied all her expectations. "You're too kind," she said, almost to herself. Elias smiled faintly. "Kindness isn't a weakness, it's just a choice." They stood in silence for a long moment, both unsure of what to say next. Rhea finally took a step forward, eyeing the tray of food. Her stomach growled again, and she couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. She had been so focused on her anger, her fear, that she had forgotten the basic needs of her body. "I suppose I should eat," she said, her voice low, almost reluctant. She sat down at the table, not taking her eyes off Elias. Elias remained standing, his posture relaxed. "You should. You're not going to get any stronger if you don't eat, and we both know how this ends if you're too weak to defend yourself." Rhea looked at him, her eyes searching his face for any hint of deceit. But there was nothing, no hidden agenda. Just a man who seemed genuinely concerned for her well-being. As she began to eat, Elias turned and walked to the window, giving her space. He didn't ask questions or press her to talk. He simply stood there watching the stars outside. Rhea ate in silence, her mind racing as she wondered what his true intentions were. Was this all just part of a larger strategy? A way to manipulate her into submission? Or was he truly different from the others? The more she thought about it, the more she realized that Elias had never once shown any sign of cruelty. He had treated her with a respect that she had never received from an enemy soldier before. It was a strange feeling, one she wasn't sure how to handle, and the more she spent time with him, the more her thoughts became tangled. When she finished eating, Elias turned back to face her, his eyes meeting hers once more. "I'm not your enemy, Rhea," he said quietly, "and I don't want to see you suffer. I just want to help." Rhea set the tray down, her heart heavy with conflicting emotions. For the first time since her capture, she felt like she had someone on her side. And yet, she couldn't. Ignore the fact that he was a soldier of the enemy. He had been sent here to bring her to her knees, to ensure her people's defeat. But as she looked into his eyes, Rhea realized something. Elias wasn't like the others. He wasn't here to break her. He was here to understand her, and that was a terrifying thought. The days that followed were filled with tension. Rhea and Elias continued their interactions, but now there was something different between them, a subtle shift that neither could ignore. They both felt it, even if neither was ready to admit it. What had begun as a simple exchange between captor and prisoner was turning into something far more complicated. They both knew it, and yet neither knew how to stop it. Rhea sat alone in her cell, her mind racing with thoughts. The chains on her wrists no longer felt as heavy, but the weight of the situation pressed down on her more than ever. The days had blurred together, each one feeling the same as the last, until Elias had come into her life. His presence had changed everything. She had spent so much time seeing him as a soldier, an enemy, someone who would eventually take her to Earth or punish her for her defiance. But now she saw him differently. His kindness had disarmed her. She had never expected this, never thought that one of the enemy could show her such genuine care. but that care frightened her. She had always been strong, always in control, and now she was starting to feel things she couldn't explain. She had a duty to her people, to her family, to her role as queen. She couldn't afford to let herself become weak, to let her emotions cloud her judgment. But Elias, he made her question everything. Suddenly, the door to her cell opened, and Elias stepped inside. His uniform was slightly wrinkled, his face drawn from a long day of work, but when his eyes met hers, there was a quiet strength in them. Rhea could see the conflict in his gaze. He had always been composed, but today he seemed different. "I brought you something," he said softly, holding out a small tray of food. Rhea stood, crossing the small room to where he stood. She hadn't realized how hungry she was until she saw the food. But more than that, she noticed the way he was looking at her. There was something in his eyes, something that made her heart flutter unexpectedly. She quickly pushed the feeling aside, trying to focus on the situation at hand. "Thank you," she said, her voice steady, but inside, her emotions were a storm. She took the tray from him, their fingers brushing briefly. The contact sent a jolt through her, and she quickly looked away, trying to ignore the strange sensation building inside her. Elias watched her carefully, his expression serious. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, his voice quiet. "About the war, about the future, and about us." Rhea felt a sudden surge of panic. She didn't want to hear this. She didn't want to know what he was thinking. She wasn't ready to face whatever feelings were beginning to grow between them. "Elias, we can't keep doing this," she said, her voice firmer than she felt. "I am your prisoner, and you are my captor. This," she gestured between them, "this can't continue. It's not right." He looked at her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he spoke, his voice soft but clear. "I don't want to be your captor, Rhea. I never did. I've been given orders, yes, but I'm not the same as the others. I don't want to see you suffer. I don't want to see anyone suffer." Rhea's heart skipped a beat. She had known that Elias was different, but hearing him say it out loud was another thing entirely. His words stirred something deep inside her, something she had buried for so long. She had always seen herself as a queen first, never allowing herself to feel too much for anyone, to care too deeply. But Elias was breaking through those walls, and she hated herself for it. "You can't change what's already been done," Rhea said, her voice trembling despite herself. "You can't undo the war. You can't undo the fact that I am your enemy." Elias took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I don't care about that," he said, his voice filled with quiet conviction. "I care about what happens next. I care about what we do now. We can change the future, Rhea. We don't have to keep fighting. We don't have to be enemies." His words hung in the air between them, thick with possibility. Rhea's breath caught in her throat as she looked at him. She could feel the intensity of his gaze, the way his words made her question everything. He was offering her something she had never imagined. A chance at peace, a chance to stop the endless cycle of violence and destruction. But at what cost? "You don't understand," she said, shaking her head. "My people are counting on me. I am their queen. I can't betray them. I can't choose peace when it means sacrificing everything I've worked for." Elias stepped forward, closing the distance between them. His hand reached out, gently touching her arm. The contact sent a spark through her, and she looked up at him in surprise. For a moment, they stood there, locked in a silent understanding. Rhea's heart raced, but she couldn't look away from his gaze. She had never felt so vulnerable, so exposed. "I'm not asking you to betray your people," Elias said softly. "I'm asking you to think about the future. We can't keep going down this path. It's tearing us both apart." Rhea swallowed hard, her mind racing. Could she trust him? Could she trust herself to make the right decision? She had always been a queen, always focused on the greater good, but Elias was challenging everything she thought she knew about loyalty, about duty. He was offering her something she had never considered, hope, and that scared her. "I don't know what to do," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Elias looked at her, his expression softening. "You don't have to know right now," he said, gently. "I'm here for you, Rhea. No matter what you decide, I just want you to know that you don't have to do this alone." For the first time in what felt like forever, Rhea allowed herself to lean into the moment. She closed her eyes, taking a deep breath. There was something in Elias's voice, something in the way he looked at her, that made her believe he truly cared. But how could she believe that? How could she trust him when everything she had known told her that the enemy could never be trusted? But when she opened her eyes and met his gaze again, something had shifted. The walls she had built around herself, the ones that had always kept her strong, began to crumble. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time she realized that she didn't have to face it alone. Elias had shown her that much. "I'll think about it," she said, softly, her voice steady once more. "But I need time." Elias nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Take all the time you need. I'm not going anywhere." And with that, they stood together in silence, the weight of their unspoken connection filling the space between them. There was still so much they didn't understand, so much to figure out. But for the first time since her capture, Rhea felt like there was hope, not just for her, but for them both. The days felt like they were stretching into eternity, each one blending into the next with no real change. Rhea remained a prisoner aboard the Terran ship, though her mind was not as focused on escape as it once had been. Instead, she found herself thinking about Elias more often than she cared to admit. The human soldier who had shown her kindness, who had treated her like something more than an enemy, now occupied her thoughts constantly. Rhea had never allowed herself to grow attached to anyone, least of all an enemy soldier. But Elias was different. He was not like the others who had captured her people. He spoke to her with respect, and when they talked, it was not about war or battle, but about life, about their hopes and dreams. For the first time since her capture, she began to wonder if there could be more than just war and death between their two worlds. But no matter how much she wanted to believe Elias was different, Rhea couldn't ignore the reality. He was still a soldier, and she was still a queen. Their positions were fixed, unchanging. The truth was, they could never be together. Her people would never accept a human as an ally, and the Terran Federation would never allow a queen of an alien species to live freely. Rhea had always known that power came at a cost, and now her very survival depended on making the right choices. That day, Elias arrived with the usual tray of food. Rhea sat at the table, her eyes following his every move as he stepped into the room. He was always calm, always composed, but today there was something different in the way he carried himself. His expression was more serious than usual, and his eyes held an emotion that Rhea couldn't quite place. He set the tray down quietly, but before he could step back, Rhea spoke. "What is it, Elias? You seem different today." Elias hesitated. For a moment, his hand resting on the edge of the table. He looked at her, his gaze unwavering, but there was a conflict in his eyes. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice low, "about what you said the other day, about the war, about peace, and about us." Rhea raised an eyebrow, her heart beginning to race. She had no idea where this conversation was heading. "And what about it?" she asked cautiously, though she already had a sinking feeling in her stomach. "Elias," took a deep breath and sat down opposite her, his posture stiff, as though he was bracing himself for something. "I've been ordered to take you to Earth. They want to parade you as a trophy, a symbol of their victory. They want to make an example of you, Rhea." Rhea's chest tightened at the mention of Earth. She had always known the Terrans were ruthless. But the idea of being taken to their home world, of being displayed as nothing more than a prize for their conquest, made her sick. She leaned forward, her voice steady but sharp. "And what are you going to do about it?" Elias looked at her, and for a moment, Rhea saw a flicker of something unfamiliar in his eyes: regret, guilt, perhaps even fear. "I don't want to do this. I don't want to be a part of this anymore. I've seen too much, Rhea. The destruction, the bloodshed, the cost of this war. It's too high." Rhea studied him closely, her eyes narrowing. Could he really be saying what she thought he was saying? "You've seen too much. But you still follow orders?" she asked, her voice a mixture of disbelief and frustration. Elias flinched, but his gaze remained firm. "I know it sounds like I'm making excuses, but I'm not. I can't keep doing this. I can't keep being part of a system that's built on destruction." He paused, his hands clenched in fists on the table. "I don't want to take you to Earth, Rhea. I don't want you to be paraded around like some kind of prize." Rhea felt a strange sense of hope begin to rise within her. Hope was a dangerous thing, especially for someone in her position, but she couldn't deny it. Elias was different. He wasn't like the other soldiers. He wasn't like the ones who took her. People's lives without a second thought. "Then what are you suggesting?" she asked softly. "What do you want me to do? What do you want us to do?" Elias exhaled slowly, as if gathering the courage to speak the words that had been weighing on him for so long. "I'm suggesting that we find another way. I want to help you. I want to help your people. We can't keep fighting like this. It's destroying us all." Rhea's heart skipped a beat. Was it possible? Could there really be peace between their peoples? Could she trust this human soldier, this captain, who had shown her more compassion than anyone else? She had to be careful. Hope could lead to destruction just as easily as it could lead to salvation. "Why should I trust you?" she asked, her voice colder now, masking the uncertainty she felt inside. "You're a soldier. You're part of the very system that has brought my people to their knees. You've seen what your people have done. How can I trust that you're not just another cog in the machine?" Elias lowered his eyes, ashamed. "I can't change what I've done in the past," he said quietly. "But I can change what happens from now on. I don't expect you to trust me, Rhea. I just want a chance to make things right. To stop this madness." Rhea sat back in her chair, her mind racing. She had never imagined that someone like Elias could feel this way. Could it really be true? Could they really change things? Her thoughts swirled in a whirlwind of doubt, fear, and hope. After a long silence, Elias stood up, his face hardening again as though he had made a decision. "I can't promise you anything, Rhea, but I'll do everything I can to protect you. If we're going to survive this war, we have to change the way we think. We have to believe that peace is possible, even if it seems impossible." Rhea stood up as well, her voice steady as she spoke. "I don't know if peace is possible, but I do know this. If we are to have any chance, we must work together. For now, that's all we have." Elias nodded, the weight of their situation hanging heavily between them. "Then let's see what we can do." The days following their conversation were tense. Elias and Rhea kept their distance in public, knowing that they had to be careful. The Terran ship was full of soldiers who would not understand the bond that was forming between them. Elias was still a soldier, and Rhea was still a prisoner. Their positions had not changed, and yet everything else had. Despite their growing bond, Elias couldn't ignore the fact that he was part of an army that had already made its decision. He had to obey orders. The higher-ups in the Terran Federation had made it clear that Rhea was to be taken to Earth, alive, but under strict guard. And though Elias was determined to help her, he knew the road ahead would be difficult. He had already disobeyed orders by showing her kindness. Would he be able to go even further, to defy the system that had raised him? Rhea, too, was struggling with the situation. She had never been in a position like this before. She was a queen, a leader of her people. Her role was to lead, to inspire, to fight. But here, in this cold, metallic ship, she was nothing more than a prisoner. She couldn't afford to show any weakness, not even to Elias. Yet, the more they talked, the more she realized how much she relied on him. He was the only one who seemed to understand her, the only one who treated her with respect, not as a prisoner, but as an equal. One evening, as the ship's lights dimmed, Elias approached her cell. He had a troubled look on his face, one that made Rhea's heart sink. When he reached her door, he didn't speak immediately. He stood there, looking at her with a mixture of concern and frustration. "What's wrong?" Rhea asked, her voice steady, though she could feel a knot forming in her stomach. Elias stepped closer to the bars, his face drawn. "I've been called in for a debriefing. They want to know why I've been spending so much time with you. They're beginning to ask questions." Rhea felt a chill run down her spine. The Terran Federation was not known for letting anything slip past them, especially when it came to soldiers breaking protocol. "What will you do?" "I don't know," Elias admitted, his hands clenched at his sides. "I can't keep lying to them, Rhea. They'll find out eventually, and I don't know what they'll do to me. If they think I'm trying to help, you escape. They'll do more than just punish you," Rhea finished for him, her voice low. "They'll use you as an example, and then they'll make sure no one else dares to go against them." Elias nodded, his eyes filled with the weight of the situation. "I know, but I can't just stand by and let this happen. I can't let you be treated like this. You deserve more than this, more than what they've done to you." Rhea looked at him, her heart torn. She had come to rely on Elias more than she had ever imagined. The idea of losing him, of him being punished for trying to help her, filled her with guilt. She had never asked him to do any of this. He had chosen this path on his own, and now he was paying the price. "You've already done so much for me," Rhea said softly. "I don't want to see you suffer because of me. I'm the one who should be punished, not you." Elias shook his head, a fierce determination in his eyes. "This isn't your fault, Rhea. This is about me, about my choices, and I'm not going to stand by while they take you to Earth like a trophy. You deserve better than that. You deserve a chance to fight back." Rhea studied him, her thoughts racing. She had always been a fighter, but she had never faced an enemy like the Terran Federation. If she escaped, she would have to do it alone. Elias couldn't help her without risking his own life, and she couldn't ask him to do that. But there was another thought, a dangerous thought, that crept into her mind. If she stayed, if she did nothing, she would be no better than a prisoner in a cage. She would be a symbol of defeat, of a people crushed under the weight of the Terran military. Was that what she wanted? To give up, to give in? She didn't know what the future held. But one thing was clear. She could not give up now. She had a duty to her people, to her family, to herself. And if Elias was willing to help her, she would find a way to escape. "We need to act quickly," Rhea said, her voice suddenly resolute. "If they're starting to ask questions, we don't have much time." Elias nodded. "I know. I've already made some plans. I've been watching the guards. There's a weak spot in the security system. If we can get there, we might be able to escape before they realize what's happening." Rhea's heart raced. Escape was possible. It wasn't a fantasy. It was real. And Elias was willing to risk everything to help her. "I'll do whatever it takes," she said firmly. "But we need to be careful. We can't afford to make mistakes." Elias smiled, a small, reassuring smile. "We won't. We'll get you out of here, Rhea. We'll get you back to your people." But as he spoke, Rhea couldn't shake the feeling that things were about to spiral out of control. The Federation would not let her go easily, and even if they did manage to escape, there was no guarantee they would be safe. They would be hunted by the very people who had once been her enemies. "I hope you're right," Rhea said, her voice barely above a whisper, "but I'm not sure we're ready for what's coming next." Elias's smile faded, and his eyes met hers with a new sense of determination. "We'll be ready. Together." As they stood in the quiet, dimly lit room, the weight of their choices hung heavily between them. There was no turning back now. They had made their decision. Whatever the future held, they would face it together. The plan was set. Elias had done his best to gather information on the ship's weak points, and Rhea had carefully analyzed every detail. Together, they had mapped out an escape route, a way to avoid detection and make it to the ship's lower deck, where a shuttle waited. The shuttle wasn't large, but it would be enough to get them away from the Federation's grasp, at least for now. The quiet hum of the ship seemed louder than ever as Rhea sat in her cell, her mind racing with the weight of what they were about to do. She couldn't stop thinking about the risks. If they were caught, they wouldn't just punish Elias. They would make an example of both of them. There was no second chance. Elias had visited her that morning, his face set with determination. "Are you ready?" he had asked. There had been no hesitation in his voice. Rhea had nodded, though her heart had been heavy with uncertainty. Could they really escape? Could they outrun the Terran forces once they were free? The ship was full of soldiers, many of whom had been raised to see her people as enemies, as obstacles to their power. And yet Elias was different. He had already shown her more kindness than she ever thought possible from the enemy. And now, with this escape plan in place, he was risking everything for her. Rhea stood up from the cot and paced the small space of her cell, the chains still around her wrists. Though they felt lighter now, the weight of her situation had shifted from helplessness to action. She had a chance to escape, and she would take it. Her heart thudded in her chest as the time drew closer. Elias would return soon, and then the escape would begin. They would have to move quickly, silently, and without attracting attention. She had already made her peace with the fact that there was no going back. She couldn't stay here and live under the rule of the Federation, not after everything they had done to her people. Just then the door to her cell opened, and Elias stepped inside, his expression tense but focused. His eyes met hers, and for a moment, the world seemed to stop. The weight of everything, the escape, the dangers, the uncertainty, hung between them. "We've got to go now," Elias said quietly, his voice firm. "Are you ready?" Rhea nodded, her heart pounding. She had made the decision, and now there was no turning back. She would face whatever came next, but she wouldn't do it alone. Elias was with her. Together they moved quickly through the ship's corridors, the silence of their movements a testament to how much they had practiced over the past few days. Elias led the way, checking the corners and making sure no one was around. Rhea followed close behind, her eyes sharp, every sense heightened as they moved deeper into the ship. The further they went, the more she felt the weight of what they were doing. They reached the access point that led to the lower decks, a narrow hallway that would take them to the shuttle. Rhea's breath came fast as they crouched by the door. They only had a few minutes before the next patrol would pass. Elias was already at the control panel, his fingers moving quickly as he worked to bypass the security lock. The door slid open with a soft hiss, and they slipped inside, moving toward the shuttle. The small craft was tucked away in a quiet corner. Of the lower deck, hidden from the main view of the ship. Elias had found this place earlier, and it was their only chance. The shuttle wasn't meant for travel between planets. It was small and fast, designed for short trips. But it would be enough to get them away from the Federation. Elias checked the controls and then looked at Rhea. "We've got one shot at this. If we can get to the escape tunnel, we can launch the shuttle and get away before they notice." Rhea nodded, her mind racing as they prepared to board. The shuttle was cramped, but it would do. They had no time to waste. Elias sat at the controls and Rhea strapped herself into the seat beside him. There was no more talking now. The time for words had passed. All they could do was move forward. The shuttle hummed to life as Elias initiated the launch sequence. Rhea's grip tightened on the armrests as the ship's engines began to roar. The shuttle lifted off the ground with a slight jolt, and they sped toward the open bay doors. Rhea could feel the tension in the air as they approached their escape point. As the shuttle neared the exit, alarms blared through the ship. The Federation had discovered their escape. "They're on to us," Elias shouted, his hands flying over the controls. "We need to get out of here now." The shuttle shot out of the bay, the vastness of space stretching out before them. Rhea's heart skipped a beat as they broke free of the ship's hold, leaving the Federation vessel behind. But even as they flew into the open void, Rhea knew this was just the beginning. The Federation would not let them go so easily. They would hunt them down, send every ship they had after them, but for now, they were free. "Where do we go now?" Rhea asked, her voice steady despite the chaos inside her. Elias glanced at her, a grim smile crossing his face. "I have a few places in mind. But first, we need to lay low. We can't risk them finding us too soon." Rhea nodded, her mind focused on the future. This was just the first step. They had escaped, but the fight wasn't over. They would need to work together, stay hidden, and find a way to bring an end to the war between their people. It wouldn't be easy, but with Elias by her side, Rhea felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, they could change the course of history. As the shuttle sped through space, leaving the Federation ship behind, Rhea looked at Elias, and for the first time since her capture, she felt a sense of peace. There was still a long road ahead, but they were no longer fighting alone. Together, they would face whatever challenges came next, and they would fight for a future where peace was possible. And, with that thought, they moved toward the unknown, ready for whatever came their way.